Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the ESO Cast, your Elder Scrolls Online podcast. Today is Friday, February the 1st. My name is Dennis Duhamel. You most likely know me as Force. And I'm joined here once again by Jesse Cox. Welcome back, Jesse.
Hello! Hello!
New week, more Elder Scrolls discussion to be had. Pretty excited. I'm tired. I am not excited.
Does it worn you out?
No, I'm not tired of Elder Scrolls Online. I'm just tired, period. I stayed up too late. I woke up early for some reason. I don't know what my problem is. It's just my forewarning to anyone listening to this that if I sound tired, it's because I am. So there you go.
I'm here now. So
you sound
pep up your step.
Yeah, you sound.
Get in there, mister.
No excuse. You sound energized. Maybe that's going to offset things. I think we'll be all set. Okay, so we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about. Maybe. We've got a bunch of stuff to talk about this week. Firstly, I wanted to point everyone's attention to the Elder Scrolls Online Community Spotlight that was actually posted by ZeniMax themselves on the official website. What they're labeling it specifically is the Fan-Crafted Beta Roundup. And in this article, they actually have just a bunch of the fan stuff that community members have posted since the announcement of the beta. Between the various articles that are posted up here from various community sites. There's also like a little Elder Scrolls Online inspired music track that was posted up on YouTube, a couple of podcasts, and then in the video section they actually ended up posting the ESO Cast for Jesse and myself, which was really exciting. But yeah, tons of community created content on this post here, right on the official Elder Scrolls Online website. So if you're just like starving for Elder Scrolls content and you can't wait till every Friday one week, then definitely go take a look at this, because plenty of other great community sites out there putting great content out as well. So definitely want to support that. But of course, this is the best. So we're the best around. And besides,
we're never ever gonna let you down.
That's right.
Although I make no promises, and our lawyers advise us to say that we probably will let you down.
Yes, most likely. 99%
most likely.
Assured. All right, so yeah, there's the Elder Scrolls Community Spotlight. Once again, that is on the official website. Go ahead and head over there if you're interested in checking that out. Beyond that, we're actually just going to jump right into some discussion here. There were some really, really informative articles posted on The Guardian as well as Penny Arcade, and we're going to be talking about both of those here. If you already read those articles, we're basically just going to be rehashing that information, but also giving our own opinions on them as well, so there's a reason to listen. So first off, let's go ahead and talk about the Guardian article. This was broken up into several parts, and the first thing we want to discuss is there's actually it's a two-part article, and the first part really primarily focused on PvE discussion, and there was a bit of new information that came out of this, some stuff we already knew, but kind of reaffirming some of that information. So the first one, let's talk about some of the PvE discussion that took place here in this article, and I'll go ahead and display that right here so you guys can take a look at it for yourself. So PvE, there's a couple of things they mentioned. First thing, people have been wondering for a while, how familiar is the Elder Scrolls Online going to be for any of us who have played the single-player Elder Scrolls games? And something that they've talked about time and time again, and that was rehashed here in this article, is that in general, these areas will look the same and they'll have the same feeling, but the layouts might be different, for example, or there might be slight altercations. And a good lore reason for that is the fact that it is indeed 1,000 years before the events of Skyrim. So you think 1,000 years, geez, a lot can change in 1,000 years. In fact, I almost think it's ludicrous to honestly believe that all of the same cities are in place 1,000 years ago. Like that's not the case here in the real world, but I suppose Tamriel isn't really the real world anyway. But for the sake of for the sake of familiarity, that is in fact going to be the case. They exampled Windhelm, saying that it's going to look similar but feel different, meaning that the buildings and stone and general setting of Windhelm will look the same, but the layout might differ slightly. And they even referenced, the river right out front of town. That will still be there. So we're still going to have that sense of familiarity, and I think that's actually probably one of the most alluring things for the single-player people, is to be able to explore, all these games that they've had access to in separate installments, to be able to explore that entire world and see all of that yourself in this massive environment with other people. I mean, that's pretty exciting. Are there any particular areas that you think you're going to go visit right away, Jesse, that you really want to see from the single player? campaigns?
Well, I mean, having seen Skyrim, I can tell you that it looked like that area looks dead on to the actual Skyrim game. It's even down to the whale, snake, eagle sort of monuments that you can move. Those are in there. It looks great. One of the things that I thought was kind of clever, and I hope it's Morrowind. I can't remember what it is. It's when, because it's 1,000 years earlier, you enter one town where it's all bronze, the roofs are bronze, everything's bronze. But if you go back and play Morrowind, when you enter that town, it's the exact same town except everything is now green and sort of worn, and that kind of after bronze rusts, that sort of idea. It looks really cool. And so what they did is they said, well, what would this look like 1,000 years before that? And so they took some of the places from previous games and went in and sort of said, what would this look like 1,000 years before? And let's make it look like that. And I think that's a unique way to go about doing it. Because you do recognize some places, and then some places are totally foreign to you.
Yeah, and I mean, logically that makes sense, but it's also, I think it's good. To be completely honest, like I just mentioned, if you think about 1,000 years of time, you would have to assume very little is the same, with the exception of like a few. Obviously, the landscape will generally be the same with some changes, but realistically, you would think, well, there's going to be a lot difference. Like, there's no way those same towns still exist. But for the sake of having people who have played those older games, to have these areas still be familiar to them with those slight changes, I think it's good that they're doing that. There's a lot of nostalgia to it, and that's also adds a lot of value to this game. There's going to be a lot of people for that very reason, the fact that they can revisit those areas. And I think you even mentioned, Jesse, and you just talked about like the snake and the whale, that whole little puzzle in one of those first dungeons that you visit in Skyrim. You mentioned that in a prior podcast, how that existed, and you even went through it. That's the sort of things that people are going to be kind of excited to see again, and to also experience it with friends, because that's obviously a big reason. One of the driving factors that people play MMOs is to have that community and play with other people. So I think it'll be exciting to like revisit those areas for sure. And it's good to know that they're trying to keep things familiar, but also slightly different. So that is cool. The next thing we want to talk about in terms of PvE is the PvE progression and PvE endgame. There weren't any specifics. We know there's supposed to be dungeons and raids and stuff like that. But when they were talking about how player progression is going to take place in the Elder Scrolls Online, they mentioned that once you are at max progression, your sort of max level, and you have a decision. You can either focus on PvP, or if you want to continue to PvE after you've leveled up and hit the level cap, they're going to have these areas known as adventure zones, and this will primarily consist of areas that aren't entirely familiar to us, areas that we haven't greatly visited in the other Elder Scrolls games. And so with these areas that they're coining adventure zones, although that term is up for change, they're going to be basically placing most of the PvE content in these areas. And there's supposed to be solo play as well as big group quests available here. And I also assume that some of the raids will be taking place in these areas as well. I can't get over the name, though. I think Adventure Zones. Are we playing Hello Kitty? Is that what's happening here?
Well, you know what? Maybe we are. Maybe that's the twist at the end.
Yeah.
It's that bastard Hello Kitty.
It's funny.
Well, I think it's a name that they have to give it because there's so many other names for different things in this game. Because there's raid zones, there's PvP zones, there's the world, the faction zone, big Cyrodiil middle area. There's soloable areas, there's group areas, there's giant. I mean, there's a million different ways, according to them, to play at endgame. So I think this sort of specify-ish is it. In a way that you understand that this area is you go in and there's going to be a whole bunch of people in there all questing towards some objective, but you don't have to group up with any of them. I think this is the one they're talking about. Yeah. There's multiple versions of this. You can show up in this thing. It could be in progress. It could be just starting, and it's this big event. Or you could go do something with some friends and do like a side mission or dungeon, or you could just do a solo thing by yourself. There's multiple ways to play. I think that's what they're trying to focus on. The problem that I see is unbalancing some of those. So, for example, what gets you more? Does that make any sense? People love loot. And
in terms of like XP return or loot return or whatever.
Yeah, I have a feeling that
see.
people are going to discover which one does the best, and then everyone's going to go to that, and then the people who like the others are just going to be left complaining that they aren't being looked after. Look, Elder Scrolls. I played a lot of MMOs. I know how these things happen.
Yeah, I mean,
I've seen it happen.
And that's, like you said, that's just a balance issue, and I think that's something they'll figure out with time. I know I wasn't playing the game during the time, but I remember hearing how the World of Warcraft, they were doing these like heroic 5-mans where you could get loot nearly as good as you could at the highest level raids. And even if they were to just do that sort of a system where a small group, a tight-knit group of people, or even solo people, because it is an Elder Scrolls game, can get loot, if not quite as good as the more time-intensive and more difficult large raids, at least somewhat comparable. So if they can do something like that, I think the Balance Act will work pretty well. Now, in terms of those adventure zones, though, just to clarify here exactly what we're talking about, I'm going to pull this right from the article. So we're talking about some of the vast uncivilized areas of Tamriel, some of the places we haven't visited in the games in the past, and they're going to use these areas, these zones within the zones we're familiar with, to solve the PvE problem of hitting that plateau and basically getting to the end game and having nothing to do. And he says instead of PvP, if you want to continue to progress through PvE and long-term based content, you will go to these adventure zones, and this is where, once again, you can solo or team up with other players, and there might even be large group quest. But I think it's neat, and I'll be really interested to see. Something else I'm really interested to see is how they handle visually these zones that we haven't been to in the world of Tamriel before, and how they try to make it different but still feel like it's part of the Elder Scrolls world. So I'm really, really intrigued to see how that ends up working. For example, you take the trek from Skyrim to Daggerfall. Like, what is the in between going to look like, and how is it going to feel? And obviously, we have a good idea of those areas like Cyrodiil and Skyrim. We've got a pretty fair idea as to how that's going to look, with slight variations because of the 1,000-year difference. But those areas that we aren't sure about, it's definitely really exciting to see. The whole discovery aspect of an MMO is probably one of the things that I enjoy the most, so I'm looking forward to that for sure. Sure. Okay, so Adventure Zones, that's exciting. Also, there was some discussion of the enemy AI in this article. This is something that we already know, but they were just talking about the fact that AI is going to work together, and they exampled things like one enemy AI may throw down some pitch, and then this mage could set it afire, and then all of a sudden you've got this spot on the ground where you're not only going to be slowed, but you're also going to be set on flame. And this is something that players can do, but the AI is going to mimic that sort of behavior as well. And this is from an older article, but I wanted to reference here because I think it's important to talk about. They've talked about how dynamic the AI is going to be and how they're going to respond based on what your group setup is and what your group is doing. Jesse, right. Could you, I know we've probably talked about this before, but could you touch on any of that you may have seen when you played the early version of the game?
Yeah, so we got to see it in a video and then actually see it implemented in the game when we got to play it. In the video, it was the exact same description you just gave. There was sort of a little demon guy, and then there was a machine that spit out just oily goo. And if you got stuck in the goo, you could not move. It was slowing you, right? And by itself, that's an annoyance. But if that impy guy was in the same room with him, he could light that on fire, and then not only would you be stuck, but you'd be burnt alive. And so there was multiple things to watch out for. The same thing goes with pretty much anything else. There were like lightning, I don't want to say Daedric demons, but some type of demon was there, and they had lightning spells, and if there was a guy who was machine was metal, it would like refract off of that. There were so many cool things that were happening, but the one that was actually in the game that we could see was there were Dwemer little mechanical dwarven robot things, spiders, and if you played against them, no matter what your group was, they always had a counterattack for that group. So, for example, if I was a tank and the other person in my group was some melee character, what would happen is they would send, one of them would come out and tank us, and the other would stand in the back and either heal, or they would shoot like ranged attacks at us, all sorts of different things. If I was a tank and someone else in my group was ranged, what would happen is they would form a bubble, and then all the little Dwemer spiders would go back in that bubble and all ranged attack us, so I would have to go to them, and they would try to take out the ranged guy while I was attacking them. There were multiple strategies, and it was kind of a pain in the ass. So I feel like I feel like there's a lot to work with there, and it's all about group dynamic. And the good thing is, your character and whoever you're with can do the exact same thing.
Right.
So if I had an ability where I think this was the Dragon Knight has a shout that gives them a buff, but a mage can suck in abilities and make them more powerful. So if I do a shout, you can suck that power in and then like unleash it on enemies, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah, that sounds pretty ridiculous, and that's the whole synergistic thing that they're gonna really try to be working on in this game, being able to work together and combine your abilities and stuff. And as we've mentioned in prior podcasts, although that's been seen before, it's a really nice thing to have in a game, and I think I'm definitely really excited to see how that's gonna work in this game in particular, and specifically not only just the players doing that, but enemy AI doing that as well. Now, those are some of the really cool things that we are going to be able to do in PvE. Unfortunately, there's also some things we won't be able to do, something that Elder Scrolls fans have really grown to love, and that is pickpocketing. It says in the article that pickpocketing is not going to be available. Now, they're specifically talking about pickpocketing against other players, so you won't be able to sneak up to an enemy in Cyrodiil and steal some of their gold or steal their dagger or pull their sword off their back. They made no, as far as I can tell, they made no direct reference to how the PvE is going to work, whether or not you can still do that, and I think that that'd probably be a happy medium if they still allow pickpocketing. Just the manipulation of your environment and being able to interact and actually have an impact on your world, obviously important in an Elder Scrolls game because that's what it's been in the past. But when talking about, trying to take things from other players, while that's fun for the person doing it, it's not fun for the person receiving, and that was essentially his explanation as to why that's not going to be an option here. I mean, you have to think about it, like, just being able to walk up to someone and, like, just take some of their gold. Could you imagine how annoyed you would be just, like, standing there in town and someone walks up to you and just steals something from your pocket? And even, like, I think what they were getting at here, too, is people were hoping that you could pickpocket from your own alliance or your own faction as well. That would just be supremely frustrating. I'd be super annoyed.
Well, I think being able to pickpocket player characters is definitely something that wouldn't fly in an MMO, but I like the idea of being able to pickpocket NPCs or various enemies. The problem is implementing it seems impossible because they have to have aggro, right? They have to have some sort of range of attack. I don't see you being able to sneak through an entire dungeon in an MMO. If you can sneak up behind guys and like one-shot them, stuff like that, it would be amazing if you could. It'd be really fun, but I don't think it's feasible. I don't think that's a thing you could do in a game with so many people.
Right, and when it comes to like stealing from other people as well, let's just pretend that they allowed us to take from your own faction. What you pickpocket, is it going to legitimately come out of their inventory? Like, are they actually going to lose an item that you take from their pocket, or is it going to be something that's completely fabricated? The idea of being able to legitimately take something from someone in your own alliance, I would assume most people wouldn't be happy. Again, the doers are happy, the receivers are very unhappy in that exchange there. And obviously it could create like this interesting social dynamic, and I just feel like you'd always be watching your back, and you wouldn't. I think something like that really discourages working with people, because you'll be like in a dungeon, and then all of a sudden someone just pulls a legendary axe out of your back pocket and runs out, or something crazy like that, so legitimately being able to pull something from someone's inventory, that you could obviously see why that'd be a huge problem. But besides that, what would people hope for? Like the game to just fabricate some certain amount of income, some septums or something, and then you just take that, so the stuff's being created out of thin air. I mean, those are your two options. You're either legitimately taking from someone, or you're taking from something that's created every time you hit the pickpocket ability. So I don't know, I think it's just for numerous issues, the ones we've discussed and probably many more, they've decided not to incorporate pickpocketing in the sense of doing it against players, and that's going to be either on your alliance or against. But again, they might do it for enemy AI. That's still a possibility, but it's just one of those things. These are one of those concessions that I guess that you sort of just expect with an MMO. I don't know. I mean, I know pickpocketing has been in other games. I can't recall if you've been able to do. I remember being able to pickpocket in WoW. I don't.
But you
know.
could only do enemies. You couldn't like do other players, and
Right.
only one class could do it. So
And that's the other thing. Like this game, anyone can sneak. So is everyone just gonna be running around pickpocketing each other all day?
well, didn't WoW sort of phase it out after a while too? Like,
I don't really.
It
remember,
exists,
yeah.
but I don't know if the newest updates completely removed it. I assume it's still there.
Yeah.
But like no one did it. After a while, no one cared. Like it served no purpose really.
Yeah, and they also it took. I think that like the time to benefit ratio wasn't worth it either,
Right.
because you got just an insignificant amount of income from it. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess the bottom line though is coming straight from Matt Fireroar, the head of ZeniMax Online. So it's not going to be there for better or worse. One of those concessions that has been made for the MMO. More discussion about player choice in the article as well. They talked about the ability, for example, to become a pet class. If you like pets and you want to have pets, there's going to be a perk that lets you become a pet class, just like that. You just select, I'd like to have pets, and then all of a sudden you're a pet class. So that's just sort of pointing to the idea that as you progress your character, although there are going to be classes, at least somewhat in the traditional sense, it's more of a starting point, and then from there you can sort of do whatever you want. So anyone technically could, be sort of a hunter-style class where you've got some sort of a pet with you, whatever, some animal that you tame out in the wild. So again,
That's kind of awesome.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. I mean, I do wonder, though. The one thing I wonder when you give such a vast amount of choice, it's like, well, how relevant or how powerful are those little extra benefits that you're giving yourself really going to be? Like, that's my one concern, because when I look at an RPG and I look at an MMO, a lot of times these hybrid classes are people who try to sort of mix and match instead of specializing in their strengths, trying to buff up their weaknesses rather than focus on their strengths. I feel like a lot of times they end up just being sort of gimped one way or the other. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do this balancing act here in this game. And something else that's really interesting to see is how effective melee classes are going to be versus range classes as well. Because you look at the traditional combat in the Elder Scrolls Online, a lot of time, it's been general consensus for a lot of people that I've spoken to that Elder Scrolls combat isn't the greatest. I mean, just the hacking and slashing, it's not the greatest combat system that's ever existed. And it'll be interesting to see sort of how they balance that, for example. Especially given the range classes now in the MMO, there's going to be that soft targeting system, so you don't have to directly hit with an arrow. You can sort of just lock on, fire spell, and you're going to hit that person based on a dice roll. You know what I mean? So
Right.
those sort of things will be interesting to see. It'll definitely be interesting to see how they balance it. But back to the point, I guess, talking about like a pet class, it's like, so if I'm if I'm a mage and I decide to get the pet thing, is it going to be a really gimped pet, as opposed to if I were to be a ranger who innately has the ability to have pets? I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but just as an example, you know what I mean? I feel like a lot of times that stuff just ends up being weaker. I don't know what your thought on the hybrid class and as opposed to like the focus class.
I assume if we're talking about the way the game works, as in you put points into stamina, magicka, or health, one of those paths is going to lead you to unlocking the ability to get a pet, I guess. I would assume that, because I'm trying to figure out how this would work, because your character, because there's multiple sort of level up screens. There's the stamina, magicka, health, but then there's also the skill tree that you have, that are your character's skills. But if everyone has access to it, I don't think that would be on the skill tree. So the only obvious answer is that it's either stamina, magicka, or health. And so with that, then you would figure whichever tree you went along. Let's say they put it in stamina. I don't know why they would, but let's say it's in stamina. If I'm pumping up stamina anyway, then having all the animal companion skills and stuff be associated with that, with stamina abilities, might work. And
Yeah.
maybe that's how they balance it. I don't know, but I'm more concerned about if I am, say, a mage, for example. I'm really interested in being a mage or some type of magic user this time around, because I've never been one before in anything else. I usually either pick a melee class or some type of like ranged bowman or whatever,
Yeah.
or a healer. And I'm usually end up being a healer because I'm like, look, I don't trust anyone else to heal me. I'm not very good at healing, but I don't trust anyone else to do it. So I'm like, maybe I'll try a mage or something this time because I've never done it before. And so I'm wondering if, as a mage character, I can get a pet, and that pet will be able to help me with all sorts of different things. Not just be an extra caster, but maybe buff my spells, or maybe do what we talked about earlier, where he throws down the pitch and I light it on fire. Something like that would be really effective. And also, what kind of pets can you get? Could I have a crocodile as a pet rather than some type of Daedric demon chick? I mean, what are my possibilities here? There's a lot I'd like to know about that because it's really interesting, and I'm hoping that it actually makes the game more overall fun. To have another person there with you, I think would change the dynamic immensely.
Yeah. Now, let me ask, did you, speaking of the skill tree system, I don't know that we have any idea exactly how that is going to work. Like, I wonder if it's going to be like a Skyrim thing where you level up, you get a point, and you can put a point into the pet constellation, for example.
Oh, I'm going off of memory now, and you'll have to forgive me. If I'm wrong, Elder Scrolls people, just send me an email like, you're an idiot, Jesse. I'm sure they'll do that. They'll do that anyway, but
yeah.
Off of memory, there was the Magicka Stamina Health, which is the more points you put into each of those, it unlocked certain things. Like, I dumped points into Stamina when I was there because it just seemed at the time, since I was trying to rush through the game as fast as I could, because I didn't have that long to play, Stamina gave you a lot of regens. So at first it gave, like, you made your stamina bar increase faster, and then it made it increase faster in combat, and then it gave you health increases, and Magicka, like, while you're fighting, so I could keep going longer, right? Health things, of course, buffed you, gave you more vitality, made you like a stronger dude, and Magicka gave you more magic damage, things like that. But I didn't use those, so I remember Stamina very well. When it came to the other side of my Dragon Knight, there was a skill tree, but I can't remember if it was a cross, like horizontal, or if it was vertical, and it's driving me crazy, but you had your abilities. So think of it like Diablo 3, where, or I guess Diablo 2 as well, where you have certain abilities, and you have, I had one that was like a pool, it was like a get over here style ability, like a Scorpion, then I had a bash, and then I had a shield smack as well, and so you could get those, and you could decide which ones you wanted to use, but you could also buff those in a separate screen. But I don't remember if it was, I think when you leveled, you got points that you could put into Stamina or Magicka or Health, and then points you could put into this as well, and buff those abilities. Yeah, but I don't hold me to that, because I could be wrong, because it's been quite some time.
Well, I mean, it sort of makes sense. Like, that's how it works. I imagine that we're not just going to be able to pick up scrolls of Fireball and learn Fireball, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do have that. I literally, I'm just combing things over in my head here, and I can't think about hearing anything in any interviews about, like, skill acquisition in this game.
No, you get what you get. Like, your character, whatever class you pick,
right,
that's what you get.
Yeah.
And then you get a whole selection of things. Then you decide from that selection which you'll use. So, for example, with me, I had a bunch of abilities by the time I was done, but the ones I used the most were I would pull guys to me, bash them, and then do a mighty swing and kill them, so I wouldn't even have to be in combat with them. I would one-shot guys pretty much, because I had buffed those abilities so much. Now, that's great for PvE, playing by yourself play. Totally useless in any other scenario. But for what I was doing at the time, it worked great. And I assume that's something you can do later, is change things around and decide what you want to use, and then redo your skill points and how you spend them. There's a lot to consider here. And then the fact that you have this other tree of your Magicka Health and Stamina, I think that as well is something to consider too. With I assume that's what changes how your character is. So you have the two skill trees. You have the one which is your personal classes tree. So if I wanted to be a Dragon Knight, for example, I'd have my Dragon Knight abilities, but if I put more stuff into Magicka or whatever, the more spell-like abilities that my Dragon Knight had would be more powerful. So I would assume that you would have sort of a range of skills, from physical to magic abilities, and depending on how you spent your health, Magicka, and Stamina, that would determine which skills you would use. So maybe at the end of the game, there could be, in one raid group, a Dragon Knight who is a tank-like character, and a Dragon Knight who is a healer. I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah, and I know just on the point of like character customization and skills and stuff like that as you level up and progress, beyond any of the stuff that we've talked about and Jesse just mentioned here, I know for a fact in the past couple of interviews that have taken place about the game that there will be skills and abilities that you can get through PvP as well as through the various guilds in the game. Like just exampling the Mages Guild and the Fighters Guild. Like as you level up in PvP, you can get acquisition to new skills that you can purchase, at your leisure, the things that you want, as well as with those various guilds. So that's going to be another way to customize your character and really have influence into what your character can do and the sort of abilities that they have and things like that. So that's pretty exciting, and that extra customization that's going to come through those other methods as well.
Yeah, I think it opens the door for all sorts of fun things.
Yeah.
The question is, will it be implemented in a way that doesn't make it so people who choose something they enjoy are ostracized for it? I hate when we get to that point in MMO, and it happens every single time. And I just hope that ZeniMax can hold it off as long as possible. But the minute some guy posts online, this is the single best build, then the world ends for games like that.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, oh, well, you decide to go healer, you're stupid.
It's it's even more amplified in this game. At least it has a potential of being more amplified because of the fact that people can do anything with whatever character. You can use any armor type, and you potentially have access to all sorts of different abilities. If you want to be, if you want to be a caster that's sort of like a rogue at the same time, you can do that. And so with people having such a wide array and being able to use every weapon type as well, every class in this game will be able to use every weapon type. And so that could be even more potentially hazardous, because if you've got all these characters that are sort of the same, or at least have the potential to be nearly the same, if there is one best build, literally every single person in the game is going to do it, as opposed to other MMOs that have very distinct class roles with set trees that they can't foray into other things, they can't use certain abilities. It's almost like, although there are differences, it's only really in the starting point, and it's a guiding line, but you can do what you want. And so with everyone potentially being close to the same at endgame, if there is one best build, like everyone in the entire game is going to have the same build. You know what I mean?
It's a little worrisome. That's why I'm hoping that there's some sort of counter to that.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting, and like I feel like that's part of the reason that you have classes. And it was actually mentioned in this article as well. They talked about this very thing that we're discussing now. It's like, well, what's going to happen if everyone can potentially be the same and there is one best build? What's stopping everyone from doing that? And Matt Firor responded with this, which I don't necessarily agree with. He responded in saying, okay, well, if you look at other MMOs that have set classes with set roles, if there's one best class, then won't everyone just roll that class? And he made that statement, and I'm thinking, well, that's not necessarily true, because when you have set classes, there's, typically a rock, paper, scissors sort of balancing system that goes on. So even if there is one class that, is better in engagements versus other classes in a 1v1 scenario, which people would argue how important that really is, since MMOs are mostly team-based. Well, there's always a counterbalance to that, typically. You know what I mean? So I don't know that I agree with the notion that other MMOs have the same problem, because if there's a one more powerful class, then everyone would just roll that, because that's not true. If there's an OP class in an MMO that I'm playing, and I have another class that I've been dumping, 60 plus days into, I'm not going to just re-roll that other class right away. I'll wait for a patch to balance things out, or I'll just be super pro and kick his ass anyways.
Right.
I don't know. It just seems like a weird statement that he made, that to say that other MMOs have that same problem. But regardless, this MMO, I will be interested to see how they balance that out, and whether or not that is going to be a problem, because that's potentially a huge problem. That is definitely could be a real issue. Okay, and the last thing in terms of PvE that I want to discuss from the article is he talked about the crafting system, and he said the crafting system will be similar to that of Skyrim. So there's going to be enchants and the sorts of things that you saw in the crafting system of Skyrim. It's likely going to be roughly equivalent to what the MMO is going to have as well. So that's just information, good information to have, especially since it's the most recent Elder Scrolls game. I think most people will be familiar with that, so it'll be nice and comfortable for them hopping into it. All right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of PvE discussion. That was good.
Yeah, I feel like though it's just the tip of the iceberg. We still don't really know all that much. A lot of generalizations there.
And that's sort of just what we're going to be doing for the next couple of months, at least until the beta kicks up. Hopefully, sometime really soon. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of generalizations. But just going with what we got here.
Yeah, it's all they're teasing us with what they're doing.
Yeah. All right, so we've got some PvP discussion to be had as well. Some new tidbits of information coming from the second part of the Guardian article. And the first of which is, when are you going to be able to start PvPing? So PvP, as we know, is taking place in Cyrodiil, and what Matt Firor said in the interview is that roughly the first 15 hours, which should put people at around level 10. So with that information, you could extrapolate how long it might take, assuming like a normal, progressively harder curve, 15 hours to level 10. I think getting level 50 is probably going to end up taking well over 40 hours, maybe somewhere around, 80 or 100 or so. Just a guesstimate there, but after about 15 hours of playtime, which will put you a level 10 out of a max of 50, the first 15 or so will be focused primarily on doing PvE content, going through your soul story progression, going through the starter areas, and then after that point, you'll have the decision as to whether or not you want to begin PvP or continuing to do PvE content. Now, if you decide to PvP at level 10, again, that's just sort of their approximate right now. If you decide to PvP at that point, what's going to happen is once you go into the PvP zone, everyone hits max level in terms of their stats, so like their health and their magic and their stamina. That will all be bumped to like an average max level character, but the abilities you have access to will only be those that which you have unlocked through the leveling up process. And then I assume, although your character in the PvP zone will be max level, you'll be acquiring XP during this process, and you'll continue to level on that separate scale that you were going through in the PvE up until level 10. So it's actually, I really like that, and it'll be interesting to see what I personally decide to do. I'm a big fan of PvP in general, and I'm almost worried that I'm going to hit level 10, go to PvP, and then level up all the way doing that, and I'll just like never see any of the zone stuff because I missed like 10 through 50 because I was sitting in Cyrodiil the whole time. But that's potentially going to be a problem for me because I'm so like into the PvP aspect. But it's pretty cool that they're letting us do that. That's actually really exciting. I don't know. Do you have any plans to go right into PvP, or are you just gonna? I feel like you might like the PvE line up to 50. You like story, don't you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I'll end up doing. I feel like I will enjoy the PvE, but maybe it's one of my on my own time things. Because PvP is probably where I'll be at most of the time. Yeah. If I make a guild, it's going to be a guild for world domination. We're not going to just have fun and sit in town and role play a tea party. We're going to go out and kill people.
Call yourself the Daleks, the Darleks. What the hell are they called? I don't even remember. We just talked about this last week.
You still cannot get that right.
World domination.
Yep, that's it. The Darlax.
That was the worst guesstimate right there. Good job.
Yep, good job. Your internet nerd cred was just taken away.
Boy. So yeah, that's it's pretty interesting, and it's definitely exciting. Like, I'm looking forward to that. I definitely am, being able to have that choice to jump right into the PvP. And it really seems to me from the interviews so far, the conversations that have taken place so far, the various videos and stuff, like PvP is a big part of this game. Like, it's going to be a pretty huge part, and I think that I feel like a lot of the Elder Scrolls fan base isn't too thrilled about that, because the game they're familiar with in the Elder Scrolls franchises, they've all been obviously 100% single player focused, but their influence from Dark Age of Camelot to directly from Matt Firor, and the fact that Cyrodiil is an entirely PvP focused continent, it really points to the fact, and the fact that at level 10 you can jump right into it. Like, PvP is a big part of what endgame is going to be. Now, they're still going to have the raids and everything like that, but for me that's really exciting, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how Cyrodiil plays out and everything. And being able to go again right at level 10 is pretty exciting. Also, in terms of PvP, there is going to be a progression system, and what's going to happen is while you PvP, you'll collect what is known as alliance points, and with that you'll be able to acquire more abilities, just like we were talking about in the past, sort of different different avenues of customizing your character and getting abilities. One of those will be the acquisition of PvP alliance points, which will let you purchase specific abilities to that place. So again, another way sort of customizing your character. They also talked about size of sort of the PvP environment: 2,000 people in Cyrodiil and about 200 on screen at any given time, which is a fair number, I'd have to say. 200 people on screen. I wonder how.
I feel like, yeah, I've been thinking, and I've been reading chat here. A lot of people are like, 15 hours seems like a lot of time to get from 1 to 10 or 1 to 15 or whatever.
I agree.
I agree, but at the same time, I think that might be an overestimate or a generous number for those people who are really slow and like to take their time. Because I did, in the version of the game I played, I don't know if they buffed the leveling speed, but I went from 1 to 14 in the time we were given, which was like half a day, and I did every possible quest there was to do. Like, I didn't rush through the questing. I did everything there was to do. So I don't think that's an accurate statement, but I could be way off because I'm not the developer. But I played it, and I saw what I saw. So, I don't know. Still, though, 1 to 14 in half a day is, that's still pretty long.
I do have to be... I'm assuming, and this could be wrong, but I'm assuming specifically for like those press conferences or whatever you want to call them, where you guys play the game, and I'm sure they're gonna be doing other ones in the future. I think that stuff is accelerated. So
I would think so too, but
just for the sake of like letting you see more and level up faster, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But on the same token, I do also think that his estimate in talking about 15 hours to level 10, that might be people who listen to any dialogue and read every single quest. Like with the modern systems nowadays, whenever I play an RPG, I freaking whatever backspace enter, whatever hotkey it takes to scroll directly through the quest dialogue. Never read an ounce of it, because nowadays it's either showing up on your minimap or you have a huge arrow pointing right to where you need to go. So there's no reason to do that reading. So I think that sort of thing, people who like to streamline that sort of thing, that's definitely going to take down some time. And, again, people who sort of power through it as opposed to kind of mosey along and pick a flower or two in between every battle. I think that definitely makes a difference too. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, that might be definitely might be a little much, because 15 hours to level 10 out of 50 levels. Like I said, I feel like to get to level 50, that probably put us around 80 or 100 hours, which seems like it might be a lot. I don't know what the standard is for MMOs.
Which, with that said, if this was an RPG of the Skyrim, Morrowind, Oblivion order, that I'd be fine with that. Right. I think the fine line they have to walk here is then making if it is 15 hours to level 10. If that's a legit real thing, then those better be the best 15 hours ever. Like story-wise, gameplay-wise, seeing things that are kind of unique and fun and wonderful. If that's the case, and it isn't just go farm 5 bear asses, right? And you just have to go around and farm stuff. If that's what you're doing 15 hours, then that's game killer, and people will hate it. But if you are actually doing something fun and interesting and entertaining, and it's something that people are going to want to see, then 15 hours is a small price. I mean, you expect an 80-hour game where something's happening every one of those 80 hours.
Yeah. And it's also important to keep in mind that even if that is a legitimate estimate now, this is, pre-beta. So pacing of an MMO leveling system is very important, and it's one of the things they definitely like to test prior to release. So I think this is also the sort of thing that through feedback, come the beta start, they're going to figure out the proper pacing to put things at a good level, because they don't want it to drag on. Like Jesse was saying, if it's taking 15 hours to hunt bear asses and get to level 10, people are going to be turned off and just go do something else. But so pacing is certainly very important, and it's something that will likely adjust before release, so those numbers may very likely change before the game comes out. All right, one more article to talk about before we end up with a small discussion and wrap up the podcast. The second article that I'd like to point everyone's attention to is an article over on Penny Arcade, the Penny Arcade Report, and they were talking about the Elder Scrolls Online and making sure that people feel like a badass in the MMO, because that's one of the greatest things about the Elder Scrolls series. It's you're the savior, you're the savant, you're the hero who's come to rescue the nation. And while that is certainly great for a single player game, how realistic is that in an MMO? So what happens in this article is it's another discussion with Matt Firor, and they're talking about the ways they're going to make sure that as a player in this MMO world, you're surrounded by other heroes, and how are they going to make you feel unique and sort of give you that experience that the single player games have always given us. So there's a few methods in terms of how they're going to do this, and one of the first ones, something that we've already talked about, is the whole solo instanced main storyline. So Jesse, if you could, because I know that you're all over this, if you could sort of describe like the main storyline that's solo and instance, how exactly is that working, and what's the story start off with?
I believe basically they didn't show us, so that's a spoilery thing. They wouldn't let us know, but they were like, Mulligan Balls steals your soul. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's what I was alluding to.
Yeah, I mean that's the gist of the game. The game starts that way, and I assume that's your story, and no one else, even though they really do, no one else has that storyline, and so that's your main story. It's actually
just you, Jesse. This is all about you.
I mean, I figured as much.
we expect you to relay us the information as to how that story is, but
right? I mean, I'll tell you about it when I go through it. But so everyone has their own personal story, and that's your single player. You can do it by yourself if you want to. It's just your thing.
Right.
Then there's the overarching story, which is the war between the three factions and trying to get Cyrodiil.
Right.
So you have this two stories going on simultaneously. One is a personal story, and one is the overarching story. And that's, I guess, how they're saying, well, there can be multiple heroes in this time, but you're the one who's actually fighting the legit bad guys that are trying to take over the world, while other people, your friends, your enemies, are also trying to do the same.
Yeah, and it's funny, because if for some reason, I'm sure there are going to be many people who are going to come into this game who have not played an MMO in the past, and they're just coming because they love the Elder Scrolls series. And if those people, for one reason or another, don't communicate with anyone else while they're in their entire experience of playing the Elder Scrolls Online, then they're really going to feel that sense of, they're the hero. If you didn't have friends in this game and you weren't playing with anyone else and you didn't meet any, you'd probably walk by people, but you put everyone on ignore, you minimized your chat box, you wouldn't have to listen to general chat. You could play this game, and with the 100% soloable instanced main storyline of you trying to get your soul back from Mulligan Ball or punch him in the face, whatever your end game is, that is all just you. And on top of that, any of these interactions for these special events that will be taking place in the world, a town getting invaded by werewolves or zombies or whatever, you protect these towns. Also, we're going to have that NPC interaction that we've grown so familiar to in the Elder Scrolls series, where if you save this town or you stop it from getting burned down, every time you go back there, the NPCs are going to respond to you, they'll cheer for you, they'll say thank you for saving us, all that sort of stuff. So again, if someone were to play this by themselves and never interact with other people, they would still get the sense that this game's all about me and I'm the hero doing everything, and that is really cool. I definitely like that. Now, obviously, the truth of the matter is most people will be communicating with other people, and everyone will realize, oh, you've got the storyline too, and you're also the hero. But again, it's to be expected. It is an MMO. But the fact that they're making those efforts to still make you feel like you're the one, and that's also something that I got with Star Wars: The Old Republic, because they were doing that same sort of thing. They were instancing this main storyline, that a majority of which you could solo, and it had that really, really impactful feeling that I was the man doing the thing, So
yeah, that was the best part of that game. Was the soloable parts. And I think the inclusion of the adventure zones we talked about earlier, those you can do by yourself, and it's just groups of people in there all towards a common goal. So you don't even need to be in a group. Mm-hmm. And I think that plays well with this aspect too.
Yeah, and again, NPCs reacting to you. And the interesting thing too is that if say you're playing with someone else and you both go to the same town where one person saved it, one person didn't, you'll see people cheer for you, and your friend who's a jerk who didn't save the town, he will see the people like boo him or say, get out of here, you didn't save us, sort of deal. So that stuff through phasing is going to be separate. So again, trying to make the individual feel like the hero is certainly something they're going to try to make sure that they do here. And another example for people who are fans of PvP is the fact that you can become the Emperor of Cyrodiil. The PvP system, how it's going to work is once an alliance takes over the Ruby Throne, then the top PvPer, they haven't released like sort of what the algorithm is or how it's going to work, but based on PvP statistics, the top one will become the Emperor. So that's something that also gives some sort of, feeling of agency and having control over the events, where if you're a great participator in the PvP events in Cyrodiil, that you can actually have the potential of becoming the Emperor. So again, making you feel like, hey man, I'm the man, I'm the hero of the story.
I mean, I don't know if being Emperor actually gets you anything.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. If there's any sort of benefit. It might just be a title.
Yeah, it might just be a PvP title, and that's you get what you get.
I think it'd be cool if they did something though. If they gave you some sort of control. You know what I mean?
Well, we talked about that when I was there with the guilds, and we actually brought that up because they had mentioned it to us, and it was tossed around that like, hey, wouldn't it be nice if you could levy taxes on like the other factions, or you could do certain things to improve your faction, basically make it a reason why people would want to go for it, because at some point, whoever has it, if they have it for a long time, if they're just like a really good PvPer, and they have more free time than anybody else in the entire world, at some point, people are just going to give up trying, and that person will be the leader forever. And you want to give them the ability to do something that would affect the game in a way that would make people be like, we need to remove this guy.
Yeah, so that'd be definitely would be cool. I mean, that like an Emperor is going to happen by default though, because people are always going to be PvPing, and someone will be the top whether they tried to or not. But to have some power would be Were you gonna? I thought you were at it.
No, I mean the other schools guys were like, well, we'll think about that, but it just doesn't seem like it's feasible. And I agree. I mean, I don't think it's possible because that would change a lot of game mechanics, but it'd be cool.
They could even do something small, I guess a cool example would be if whoever takes the throne, if their guild has an emblem, that emblem is tossed onto flags surrounding the city or something, Something so that other people know, oh, that guild took it, this guy sort of thing. And if there's any, I don't know, just even something small like that, even something that's not too significant, that'd be really neat to see.
It might be cool if it just, after someone becomes Emperor, whatever time period that is, before they do the algorithm that decides, after that's over, everything resets. So the guy is Emperor, he has the Emperor title, but he must participate in the next round in order to keep it. Things like that. So everything resets stat-wise. And so, like you're saying, flags would be everywhere, but the battle would start over again, but just with his flag everywhere. So it's the exact same thing of, oh, there's a corrupt leader inside, except this time the corrupt leader's you. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Again, this is something that we'll find out more once the beta gets implemented and more information is released. It's definitely exciting to think about, though. All right, so one last thing that I wanted to discuss here today is the notion of this game potentially being bad. When this game was first announced, there was a lot of mixed reaction, and one of the biggest complaints, of course, was the fact that people were saying, I can't believe they're turning this into an MMO, and this is a single-player game, it's not going to be the same, etc., etc. Now, beyond that, there are also people saying that, the fact that it's an MMO is the reason why some people think that this game is not going to be great, because there have been so many letdowns in recent history. I mean, in the past 5-6 years, I can't remember, there's really no MMOs that I've stuck with for any significant amount of time. The only one that I really did was the World of Warcraft. I've dabbled in other ones, played them for a couple months at a time, but there was nothing that really stuck me and kept me there for the end game. And I think there's also just sort of a general fatigue with this notion of fantasy MMO because the market is so saturated. Now, obviously, I've got really high hopes for the Elder Scrolls Online, and I definitely think that this is a game that has the potential to be fantastic, and hopefully it will, in fact, be fantastic. But, could be bad, and as much as that would suck, I think it's an important issue to address, like the potential that it has for failure, the potential that any MMO has for failure. And there's so many different points to this. You could talk about a potential subscription model, whatever the payment method's going to be. You could talk about the fact that it's an MMO in general, trying to take the Elder Scrolls universe and transfer it to there. But are there any particular reasons that you, Jesse, have heard, or that you think people are sort of being naysayers and thinking that this game is just going to flop?
Besides the things that I've heard have been like the characters don't look like Elder Scrolls characters; they're too cartoony. The world doesn't look like the world I remember. It's multiplayer, and no one wants to play multiplayer. Yet I seem to remember many people being like, "Why can't we have multiplayer Skyrim?"
Those are different people, though.
Oh yeah, of course. And there's all sorts of things. Like even in chat, some guy was like, "This sounds more MMO and less Elder Scrolls." There's all sorts of things that could totally destroy this game, but none of it is a real thing. All it is people just speculating right now.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like ZeniMax has a lot to prove with this, because I will say, MMOs for me, I'm in fatigue mode. And I think a lot of other people are too, where there was very few, right? There was the days of Ultima and Elder Scrolls, and then Final Fantasy 11 and Lineage and things like that.
Quest, all that, yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, we got WoW, and WoW was a huge success. And then everyone and their brother was like, "We can do this too." And then all the MMOs started to come out, and they were just either clones of WoW or progressively worse versions of WoW, or eventually we just became a market that was oversaturated. And people just got tired of it. And the people who play WoW now, if you were to go find 10 WoW players and ask them, I guarantee 7 of 10 would say, "I play WoW because my friends play WoW, not because they love the game." There's people who love that game. I love the story of WoW, but the game itself, I'm just like, oh, I'm so worn out. I can't. The time and energy required to do the same thing I've done for 7 years, I just can't do anymore.
Yeah.
And new MMOs, when you join them, you're like, this is the exact same thing I just got done doing. Why would I do this someplace else? I can go back to WoW, the same thing. Yeah. And so people are just tired of it. And I feel like they have a lot of work ahead of them if they want to make Elder Scrolls Online seem different. And I think that's what they're trying to do, is make it a Elder Scrolls experience first, MMO second. But again, us sitting here talking about MMO stuff, people are probably like, dude, you're not really describing it very well. But it's hard to do when the things that they've released are the MMO aspects.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's the biggest thing. I think that the biggest complaints levied against this game is the fact that people are just sort of getting fatigued on sort of the modern notion of an MMO, and we have to really hope that this is taking a step in a better direction, in a new and improved direction. And there's, again, there is certainly the potential, but whether or not they're going to deliver, that's nothing. We really won't know that until a couple months after release, once people have leveled up. And even if the whole leveling process is fantastic, the end game is really what's going to, keep a community there and keep them going on. But like you said, that's the other worry. If we hop into this game and we're playing and after those first 15 hours, we get to level 10, we're like, this feels vaguely familiar. Like, I feel like I've had this experience before. Fantasy creatures, huge, oversized trees and houses, and casting magical spells. This seems really, really familiar.
Well, from what I played, from 1 to 14, it went by very quickly and didn't feel like it was something I had played before. There are aspects of it that did. Definitely, there are some things I did. But since I was a melee character, my attacks and abilities were... I was pressing 1 through 5, doing those abilities like I would in, say, like Diablo 3, for example. But at the same time, my right and left mouse button were my 2 swings. And so if I held one down, that was a super swing. So I had 2 different styles of gameplay going on, and it wasn't just pressing buttons and then auto-attacking, right? There was more going on there than your normal MMO. And I'm okay with that. I actually am really okay with that, because I like that half MMO, half Elder Scrolls feel. And It was really enjoyable. It went by very quickly. There wasn't any grinding. One of the things that you could do right off the bat, which I thought was genius, is the starting area that we were given, which was in Skyrim. It was an island. The island is under siege by the human forces, the Covenant, I believe, and they are attacking the island, and your job is to get everyone off the island. And immediately you're given a choice. The commander's like, we can either run now, or you can go and pick up some people and get off the island and take them with us. Because there are people out on the island doing whatever it is that people do. And so I chose to go out and save everyone. Some other people who were in the room with me were like, screw it, let's just go. And they moved on to the next section. Well, when I went out into the next area, I saved all these people. I saved every single person. I searched that island up and down. I found like secret treasure caches that weren't even listed. I found different kind of like temple things and special mobs and different things. And I brought everyone back, saved everyone, and as we left, they all helped me escape. And when I got to the new area, they were all there with me, and were like, hey, thanks for saving us, here's some stuff. And they were part of my story. And so that aspect of you can do this and this and this, I think that works. Mm-hmm. And it's all about them keeping that up through the rest of the game. Like having the ability to do things, whether pretty much anything you want, that's what makes it an Elder Scrolls game. Elder Scrolls games are good because you can be and do what you want. There is nothing telling you can't do it that way. And I think that's what they need to do. There needs to be multiple ways to do things, which might be
certainly as much as like is feasible in the MMO space.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I know like you touched on combat, and I know that's a big complaint that people have about MMOs is they say, oh, I'm so tired of hotkey-based combat. Well, for one, you're always going to be using your mouse and keyboard unless you want to play an MMO with a controller. So some system that's, you're still pressing something, you're still hitting keys on either one of those two things. But I think it's definitely about a lot more than the combat because, we have the standard sort of lock-on systems that, World of Warcraft has implemented. And then you look at a game like Terra. Terra, for all intents and purposes, is action combat. You're dodging things and you have to actually connect with your attacks. It's nothing, you're not like locking onto people. The melee characters, I at least know that's true. So a much different combat system, and obviously that wasn't enough. Like Terra's doing okay, but they just recently had to go free to play, so they're obviously not doing that great. So yeah, there's so many things that are gonna. It's definitely a really delicate balance. And if they really want to be the next big thing, they're gonna have to get a lot of things right, and they're also gonna have to do some things new, fresh, and exciting that people haven't seen before. So I'm also hoping, beyond everything we've talked about, that there are things that, people haven't done really before. The PvP system is a lot like Dark Age of Camelot is directly influenced from that. And they're going to be doing a phasing system, and there's going to be personalized story. But those are also things that have been done before. And maybe if they strike the right balance, it won't matter that they're just doing those things over again. But I definitely still do hope that there are some things in the works that we don't know about yet that's going to be exciting, new, and fresh, because it's more than just the combat. I think, again, it's just the general experience and the feeling of, I've already done this. I've been in this world before, and I've played this sort of game, and I've done these sort of quests, and I think that's what a lot of people are fatigued on, and the hope once more is that can be not the case here, and it'll be something new, fresh, and really exciting. Keeping my fingers crossed.
I think that's what everyone's hoping for. For a fact that while I'm a big proponent of this game, and I think it looks amazing, and I cannot wait for it, that if it does suck, I'll probably be one of the first people to be like, why? And start crying on the internet. So, trust us, we want this to succeed, but we're not like, all right, we want it to be good.
Did you not have similar feelings about Guild Wars 2? I remember, I don't know if it was you, I remember someone saying, this game's cool, but if you're expecting something revolutionary, it's not.
Well, that was me, and I got a ton of crap for it. I had a nice Reddit post that was about how I'm an idiot for when Guild Wars 2 was coming out. I said, I played the beta, I'm in the beta. If you're expecting revolutionary, it's not. And it's basically taking old WoW mechanics and putting a new fresh coat of paint on them and giving you something a little bit different. And people were like, yeah, they're so wrong, it's not revolutionary, it's evolutionary, and you don't get it. And so then after people played it, even though it looks and plays differently from WoW, you still feel the same. It's really hard to explain.
It's like it's this intangible thing, and I'm really trying
Yes.
to try to be like beneficial to the community. I'm really trying to pinpoint, what is the thing that we want differently, because we can stomp our feet and complain all day, like I want something different. But if we're not telling developers what it is or what we're looking for, but I don't know, maybe that's not necessarily in the fans' hands, and I guess that's the job of the developer to give us something new and exciting that we haven't seen. But it's definitely tough to pinpoint what it is,
People want to feel different when they play a game. If it's a franchise game, I want to feel the same. Like, for example, Dead Space 3 is coming out this coming week.
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel like I'm playing Dead Space 1 and 2 when I play the game, right? Like, that's a franchise
Hope you love
game.
Microtransactions.
Oh, man, I'm going to buy a lot of whatever.
Do you know that they've got 11 DLCs on day one for that game?
But again, I don't buy that crap. Like, I don't buy collector's editions of anything, so that never affects me.
Off topic,
but the idea of like I want that game to be like the previous, right? If I'm playing an Uncharted game, I want it to be like previous Uncharted's. Things like that. If I'm playing a new MMO, I think the problem is everyone sort of has it in this same. All MMOs need to play the same way, so people feel the same when they play it. Like, well, WoW played like this, so if we incorporate a few WoW things, then people will feel right at home. The problem is they feel so at home that they're like, why am I playing this when I can just go back to an older game?
Yeah, I hope that any developers of MMO, be it ZeniMax or any other upcoming games, have figured out by now that if you just try to put a new coat of paint on the WoW formula, they're going to play your game for a month and then go back to WoW. That has been evident in MMOs released since. These games have come out, they've done well for a few months, then the player base dropped off. They said, it's the same thing, I'm going to go back to where the rest of my friends and 10 million other people are and just go do that.
And the one game that did something different, and I thought did it kind of well, DC Universe Online, that was a real creative way they set up that game. Mm-hmm. It was an MMO, but not in the same sense that other MMOs are. It was really fun, and it was very casual and kind of silly. And the problem is that once you hit endgame, there was nothing to do. So that's a whole other thing you need to worry about. So people would go through the story and fight all the DC superheroes and villains and that whole thing, and it was really fun. But you hit max level, and it's like, all right, well, this is boring as balls. And so that's another problem you have to worry about. So you can spend all your time doing a Star Wars: The Old Republic. You've made an amazing single-player story, but when you hit endgame, if you're going to charge money for it, there better be a bunch of stuff to do there.
Yeah.
And just like in that game, there was nothing.
It's tough. The MMO, business. It's a tough business. It's a risky business. There's lots of money to develop a game as massive as people want, and to play catch up as well. To catch up to these games that have been here for so long and been pumping out content for years and years on end, and try to have all of that at release. First of all, it's almost unfathomable, but it's almost necessary if you want to succeed. So. It's scary, it's tough, but again, the hope is there that ZeniMax is going to pull it off, and this will be something that we'll be still talking about, a year after release, and not just the fact that it's gone free to play.
I'm telling you, I feel like, and this is something that I think developers are wary of, but everyone's like, free to play, man, ooh, that's scary. It makes people think that your thing's crap. Everything that has gone free to play has done better than when it was pay to play.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
That's true. The companies that financially typically see gains twofold, if not more.
Of money, yeah. And subscribers have gone up because people, when they see that, they say, all right, I'm going to give this a chance. And then a lot of people are like, this is actually kind of cool. And they stick with it. I think one thing that Guild Wars did right is it was, okay, you pay us once and then you're good. But because they have all these other additional things, like if you want more bags, you can, use your gems on that. If you want, and they're making a ton of money on people buying the extras in that game.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the way to go for this. I'm just saying. I know they won't listen to me. They don't care. But I feel like that's the way to go.
I still think that they're gonna, because they can probably get away with it. They're gonna try the subscription. But that's another thing. Is that gonna turn off such a large portion of the Elder Scrolls fan base that has never paid a monthly fee to play one of those games, especially with the prevalence of like if I'm someone who's just played Elder Scrolls games, don't have any experience with MMOs or anything, and then I look up, MMOs, wow, there's a lot of free-to-play MMOs, but why are they charging me for this this one that's coming up. Like, that's weird. It apparently works for all these other games. So yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting, and I think that's something that could even make or break their launch, which potentially could make or break the game, what model they decide to do. And I'm not going to say which one is best one way or the other, but they obviously both have their pros and cons. One of the major arguments for a subscription fee is that they're making so much money that they can continuously put out good content. But it is also true, like Jesse just said, that free-to-play sometimes makes a lot more money. You know what I mean? So you could obviously, if you're making more money, put out more content, right?
Yeah, maybe it's you pay, but you don't pay $14, $15 a month. Maybe there's a smaller fee you could pay. There's got to be a nice middle ground here where content can still be produced without it being, one, repetitive and awful, and two, being timely. So it's always there. You can get stuff. I mean, Guild Wars 2, for example, they're still putting out updates and little content patch things all the time. I mean, since that game went live, you didn't have to pay for anything besides the initial purchase, and you're getting new dungeons and new events, and so it can be done.
Yeah.
I just think that there's some middle ground here that can get us the best we can get.
Yeah, and
that's what we're hoping for. Is the best.
And like with free to play, like impulse buys are so important. And I do want to wrap things up. I just want to mention one thing though. The idea of a store, something that's been brought up on Reddit before and in the Elder Scrolls Online community, is the notion of having, player created gear that could go through a filter system through ZeniMax to make sure it's not crazy overpowered, and then potentially be posted on a store. That sort of thing, where if microtransaction can take place, and if they make sure that whatever gear is created by players isn't stronger, maybe it just visually looks different, for example. So people are going to want to purchase it because there's a cool factor. That's a legitimate thing. Look at League of Legends, one of the largest, crazy amounts of money they're making, one of the largest online communities, and the game's completely free to play. People pay for stupid skins for their characters that have default skins anyways. So paying to look cool is something that exists. It's this this whole notion of wanting to look different than everyone else around you. And if they could do something like that, they could attribute a store to it. And there's definitely lots of possibilities. And maybe that's something we can talk about in a future podcast. But it's interesting and exciting and also scary at the same time. We'll have to see what they decide to do. I don't know. All right, Jesse, I think we're done here. We're going to wrap this up.
Okie dokie.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the ESO Cast, your Elder Scrolls Online podcast. Once again, my name is Dennis Force Duhamel, joined here by Jesse Cox. You can join us next week. We'll be talking more and keeping you up to date about anything going on in the Elder Scrolls Online universe. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye.